Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning, we hear you.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Ron Bell. I'm your host of Boston Black News. We are here again. I'm very excited. I have Singer here who's going to talk a little bit about this article that he wrote. For first, I got to remind people to vote. Okay, you know elections here. Election 2024. But I have to remind people on September 3rd is the primary election. Polls open at 7 a.m. They close at 8 p.m. Make sure you get your voter registration form. The last day to register to vote is August 26th. So we have voter registration forms here at the studio. You can come by and get one of these guides. It'll show you who your elected officials are, your state rep. They are running this year. You have your U.S. Senator and congressional seats that are running this year as well. So make sure you get a guide. Make sure you register to vote. So, Singer, you're here to talk about this incredible article you brought to light, and I'm really happy that you wrote about this because Michelle Wu in 2023 said she was giving away 150 vacant lots to developers for free.
And thank you, Ron, for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm grateful for the opportunity. It's also good to see you. And
good seeing you, man.
Good to see the pastor. I have missed both of you. So
okay.
Michelle Wu in 2023 January announced it's called the Welcome Home Boston program. They're going to give away 150 vacant lots to build affordable housing. Which, as you know, there's an affordable housing crisis going on. And the idea, of course, is to build affordable housing in neighborhoods that have been lacking affordable housing and have long been denied opportunities, particularly Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan. The area we're talking about now mostly is just south of Franklin Park. The question became, and it wasn't my idea. It was actually Diane Wilkerson, I think, is the first person who said something along the lines of, "Well, where did those vacant lots come from? Why are they vacant?"
Right.
And when you start to ask that question, suddenly you get into a much more complicated issue, which is what we're here to talk about. That the fact of the matter is that these lots at some point were owned by Black and brown families. Some portion of them are also owned by Jewish families who had fled the area because they were afraid of the black people. But once you start doing the history, it gets really, really interesting.
Right.
So for me, this whole thing began with a phone book.
You know, it's interesting you mention that, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I was thinking about that the other day. I haven't seen a phone book in a very long time.
Yeah.
And when you had mentioned that, I was like, wow, I was just thinking about that the other day.
Yeah. So I found I was in some office in Dorchester. This guy was emptying out his uncle's office, and I bought a piece of a file cabinet from him, 1940s wooden file cabinet, whatever, from my office. As I'm leaving, he's got all this stuff. He's been in his office for 70 years, and I was like, what about these? And he just gave me these two directories of the city from the 1950s. It turns out there are these directories, and the thing about them is not only are they phone books, but they also are reverse directories. In the back, it's listed by address first. And they printed these things until the mid-1970s.
Right.
So in 1975, for instance, you can go and look up the address at 40 Kempton Street, and you find Robert L. Bell. It looks like it's a three-family, because there was a vacant on the first floor, Robert L. Bell on the second floor, and Phyllis Peterson on the third floor.
I remember that. That's where I grew up.
And then it's really, and then next door, Natalie Tompkins, Steve McLean, the McPherson family, Bernard Bennett's down the block. There's an apartment building, 37. 38. Did you know Alicardo Fernandez? You grew up in a very diverse neighborhood.
Oh, very diverse.
Yeah. And the point being that once you realize that you can see who lived in these places, then you can start having this conversation about, okay, well, what used to be there? This stuff ends up being not all that helpful.
What year was that?
This is 1974 and 75. I'll give you the copy of this page so you can go back and look and probe your memories. But that's your hood.
That's my hood.
Yeah. And then you can start going back and looking for the property records. This is just a phone book, so
Right.
and who knows how good it is, but you can start looking at the property records and see who actually owned these things. And what we began to find was there were these black families that owned these properties, and particularly what was going on at the time. And this is where this is where I need Carolyn Crockett to sit here next to me, right? Because this is about 50 years of history of real estate and redlining and racism in institutional finance,
Right.
from basically 1950 to basically 2000. And what you see is that as the Jews were fleeing, the blacks were being invited to buy into these neighborhoods at very, very low entry cost, to buy buildings that were in very poor condition, and that they could get a loan to buy it because the feds were financing the mortgages.
Right.
And so nobody cared if they defaulted, which they would.
Right.
The taxes, this part really, stop me, Ron, when I get boring, but the tax rates in these neighborhoods were higher than in white parts of the city
Wow.
for decades. So you're buying a poorly maintained piece of property that was out of shape and old. You're getting in for cheap. You're paying higher taxes than other parts of the neighborhood, than other parts of the city are paying. And who knows whether you have, and can you get any kind of other financing to fix it or rehab it? Probably not, because you happen to be black. And then you lose the property because you don't pay the tax, you don't get the water bill, whatever. And in some of the people I spoke to, basically the family would buy 3 or 4 of these things and walk away from the ones they couldn't fix.
Right. You know, when you're talking about, my life, because I'm like thinking about when you had mentioned Kempton Street. For those who don't know, Kempton Street was around before Mission Park was built. And actually they renovated and tore down the housing. They were housing on Kempton Street. They were torn down.
So this is gone now.
This is gone. This is gone. They still have a Kempton Street, but it's in Mission Park now. And so when you're mentioning my neighbors, I'm like, wow, this is like, wow, bring me back to childhood.
Yeah. Well, so, and urban renewal is a different thing and I want to get back to that later because what we found, and I want to say, all blessings and thanks go to the Saucer Sisters for this story. This story happened because while I was going through all this stuff and finding all this paperwork and getting some names, then you've got to find the families.
Right.
Are they still alive? Are they still around? And I managed to find 3 of them. One of them didn't want to talk to me. Second one was very, very helpful and constructive, and I appreciated the binos. They were great to talk to. And the Saucer Sisters, who I found, basically said they befriended me effectively and said,
Wow.
let us tell you everything. And it has been just an honor and a pleasure to get to know these women and to get to spend some time with them and to go to the site where their father owned these buildings. And the Saucer Sisters, my story basically begins with them standing on this vacant lot saying, I think there was like a storefront here because my stepmother did hair in the salon there. And they're right. I can prove there was in fact a storefront there.
Right.
I found that part. And their question to the city is effectively, this lot is, by the way, it's valued at like $735,000. The city gave it away for $200 to a nonprofit that's never built any housing before.
Wow.
To come up with a plan to build like 15 units of affordable housing on this lot. And the sisters' question was basically, well, why not us? Why didn't you call somebody whose name used to be on
So
it?
they never notified?
No.
Wow. It's curious to find out, where did these families go? Were they gentrified or did they move out of state?
Well,
Like you said, one of them knew me.
So
Saucy?
so the Saucer Sisters still live in the area.
Okay.
One of them had gone to Atlanta for a few years and then came back. The other 2 are still here. And like they said, they're like, we are Boston people.
Right.
We want to stay in Boston. We want to stay in this neighborhood. Why can't we? This was our father's property. And then they tell a story. Their father, was a not quite sure what the word properly to describe it, but he was an entrepreneur in a bunch of ways. Like he had a carpet business. He had, I think he'd been in the military. He was a mason, very well known in the neighborhood, Jimmy Saucer. And he was into a bunch of stuff. Like he had some properties, he had some other things, and so he was again trying to buy properties, trying to renovate them, trying to rent them, whatever else. And they can sort of go through the neighborhood like, oh yeah, I remember that place, and I remember that place, and he died in, I guess it was 2018 or 2019, and the sisters got nothing.
So there's 150 properties?
150 properties.
And they're all in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan?
Yeah.
Because I'm just trying to find out, because you see all these buildings going up, and I didn't realize there was that many lots available.
So there's lots of lots. The city has I don't have all the information. I'm still learning. What I have is the 45 or 48 lots that the city has already designated to give away to developers. And then there's some more that are sort of in the pipeline. And I don't think I have, in fact, I do not have all 150 addresses that they are designating. But yeah, the city online has a city audit. They audited all their public space, and there's a ton of it.
Wow.
And some of it, you mentioned the urban renewal question. Like you get to this, there's a secondary question. These are not urban renewal. These are properties that fell into disrepair. The city the city boarded them up, took them over, charged the tax lien, whatever, bulldozed them. Send you a bill for that, by the way.
Right.
I love that part. And then it usually takes about 10 or 15 years, just sits there, and then the city finally takes it to court and takes it, and then it sits there some more. But the city at that point fences it and mows it. So urban renewal is a different matter. Like when they knock down the West End, for example, I don't even know what the addresses would have been back then that I could go look up the property records for. All right, so I want to, and I'll do the shout out here to anybody who's tuning in. If you know of urban renewal areas where there's some idea of what the addresses might be, or we might be able to find the addresses,
right?
Then we can find the property records and we can figure out who actually owned the buildings that were being knocked down. That is sort of next on my list. Not entirely next on my list. There's something else on my list, but
right. So where all these developers? I mean, because they still have to go through a process.
Yeah.
Is there any barriers that you see forthcoming?
There's nothing but barriers. It's all barriers.
Oh, like what?
I will be stunned if any of these things get built.
And why is that?
The way this program is being run by the city, it's a multi-layered consultant's dream, right? But what the mayor has tried to do is to kill like 15 birds with one stone. She needs affordable housing. Totally understandable. Great idea. She wants economic redevelopment in Roxbury and Dorchester. Totally understandable. Good idea. She wants affordable housing for families in those neighborhoods. Totally responsible. Good idea. She wants these things built by new, primarily minority-owned or women-owned development companies to build the economic skills, to build the development skills and the economic opportunity for those communities to become developers.
Right.
Okay, good idea. She wants these things to be built meeting all of the massive, the major climate change goals. So they have to be green, all electric, LEED certified. Okay.
All new initiatives, I might add.
Yeah, good idea. It needs to meet the BRJP, of course, and hire black and local residents on the construction projects. Okay, good idea. But you start layering these things on top of each other, and as somebody explained, and they have to be affordable.
Okay.
But affordable, of course.
We know what that means.
Well, in this case, it's 80 to 100% of
affordable to who?
Well, you can look it up, and my story says, you'd have to be earning basically $90,000 to $150,000 to buy into one of these properties. So you start to layer all of these requirements on top of each other, and you end up with a bunch of new, inexperienced developers trying to build on properties that have been vacant for 40 years, probably for a reason. I know some of the properties in the system were rejected by previous developers because they're too hard to build on.
Right.
The price of construction has been going up and up and up. All these people are working in this sort of restricted area. again, because they're new and they're small, they're not buying in bulk, right? They're not getting the discounts. And the city has actually hired a technical assistance consultant to help them do this work.
Right.
And then, and the city is providing millions in tax and in federal COVID money to help subsidize this. The city is giving away $700,000 properties for $200, and the city's going to subsidize the buyers with down payment. So it's basically just a giant stack of government subsidies masquerading as a house.
Right.
So,
yeah. You know, one of the things that struck me was the fact that, you know, we've been hearing a lot of talk, and I mean talk, about reparations. And, you know, across the country, DEI is being slashed, affirmative action's gone. And it seems to me, okay, you just talked about the barriers, but I think Senator Wilkerson, Diane Wilkerson, had mentioned something about hold off on giving out this land because this could be a part of the reparations or repairment, I might add, as far as not just talking.
Well, and that's a shout out to my colleague Soraya Wintersmith. She had gone to a reparations task force hearing last year, and Diane Wilkerson at that hearing had raised this point and had said effectively two things. One, the reason these properties are vacant is because they were bulldozed they were owned by black and brown people and then bulldozed by the city. And what we've proved in our story is, at least in several of these cases, that's correct. The other thing she said, that I think is a more subtle but an interesting point and harder to track, is that if you use this property, these vacant lots, and this $60 million pot of money for this project, then there won't be any land left or any money left to give to black people in reparations, which is a really interesting way of thinking about, is there, or should there be in this case, as the reparations task force goes forward, is there essentially a reparations bank that we should be building up, which we can then pay out the reparations from? Which is sort of what she was indicating, which is a really interesting concept, and I hadn't really given thought to.
Wow. So where are we as far as with these sisters? You had mentioned before that they had talked about wanting their properties back.
Yeah.
And has there been any movement towards that, or is
Not that I know of, no. And you know, again, these are some powerful and wonderful women, truly. And one of them said to me, you know, do you think, you know, we'll be able to get this? And I said, no. And they basically said, it doesn't really matter to us. I mean, in the sense that that's not why we're doing that. That's not why we're talking to you. But we're talking to you because we want to be heard, and we want people to understand that there are people out here like us.
A whole bunch, probably.
It's not just
right?
us.
Wow.
There's a whole bunch of us out here, and we want to represent the fact that this happened to people, and whether or not we get a piece of property, people need to remember that these vacant lots have not always been vacant, and that there are families, family histories behind every one of those lots. Right. Which was it's an incredibly powerful and generous thing, and I'm just, as I said, I'm truly, truly grateful to them.
Well, you know, when you was talking about, you know, 40 Kempton Street, where I grew up at, and we talked about urban renewal, all that visual just came back, you know, remembering these houses, these vacant lots, and how Boston has changed. Like when you go to Back Bay, you don't hardly see any black folks in the Back Bay area, Fenway, you know, Copley Square. There are black folks from other countries.
Yes.
But not from here.
Yes.
And it's interesting when you go to cities outside of Boston, them are folks that grew up with me in Brockton and Randolph and Avon. They're all over the place. And when you hear something like this, it's really disheartening, to say the least.
Well, and there's this question that comes back and forth, and you know, I hear a lot of this, and for years we've heard this question. Take any one of these vacant lots. You know, this one's on Erie Street. As a vacant lot, it's doing no good to the neighborhood, which is mostly true. I mean, there's a grill on it now, so clearly someone's been out there using it as a park, but there's also a park across the street. Right? So what would really benefit the community? Would it benefit the community to have that property for some other purpose? Would it benefit the community if the Saucers were given a patch to just build a 3-family home?
Right.
Is it going to benefit the community to have 3 6-family units or 6-unit buildings built on that corner? Because actually the corner of Glen Way and Erie, or will that become gentrification that's going to now chase out
Interesting.
the other people who are already there? I mean, I don't know these questions, right? But we always have these. I mean, when you build something nice in a neighborhood, does that mean that the people who currently live in the neighborhood have to leave because they are not nice enough to keep up with the neighborhood?
Right.
It's a real.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, the housing is built. But what about the folks that are living here now?
Right.
What about people that need housing now?
Right.
I mean, is there any criteria?
Well, and again, because these are affordable housing, they're built to be workforce housing. These is not for the poorest of the poor. It's not for the lowest of the low income. This is for workforce housing is what it's meant to be. So the theory is it'll be built because Ron Bell and his partner and their 2 kids will be able to move into one of these units, which is great. Right. Because we want you to be able to afford to live in Boston. But it also asks the question about what about somebody who's earning, only a minimum wage salary? Are they going to be able to? So the person who's, working at the auto body shop, are they going to be afford to buy into this place? Probably not.
Yeah. 617-282-0685. If you're out there listening, maybe you have lost your home. Maybe you lost your lot. We're discussing here with Singer. He's in the studio with us today, and we're talking about a land that's been owned by Black and Latino families that are being given away by this administration, Mayor Wu. Wow.
Yeah.
So
then the next question becomes, right, what they're putting up in these places. And I will say that I've been really intrigued by the fact that the city says there has been a very active and vibrant community process to talk to the neighborhoods about what is going in.
Okay.
I started that sentence with the city says. I haven't seen that process, so I can't judge it. What I can tell you is I've talked to some neighbors whose heads are exploding because they're just like, you're building this giant thing on this small street. It's one-way street. There's going to be parking. It's going to ruin the parking. The traffic's going to be insane. They didn't talk to us. Nobody told us. And I've also met some people who said that they tried to buy some of these lots previously. Neighbors.
Really?
Yes.
That are Boston residents.
That are Boston residents.
Wow.
Abutters. I will say the word abutters. My wife loves when I say abutters. It's the abutters program. Because the city had a program, has a program, I'm not sure, had a program to allow you to buy the property next to you. If it was vacant. There's a whole bunch of limitations on that, whatever. But now I want to start to ask, like, this nonprofit that was able to buy this property to develop it, but the neighbor across the street was not able to buy the property to build on it. Is that because that neighbor was black, or is there some other reason? And is there any data? Like, I can listen to people complain all day long, right? But is there any actual data that proves what has transpired here? That's going to be next on my digging list.
I'm wondering how many LLCs or development companies have been formed because of this new initiative.
Yeah.
That's another question. I mean, because clearly they may not have the experience and they want to get into development, properties being given away, housing's a major crisis.
Yep. Well, in fact, the one that I wrote about in not the Saucers family property, but the other property on Nottingham Street. The Bino family had owned that property, and that property, the developer that got it, remember, Mayor announced his program in January 2013. The developer that gets this property is called KZ Builders.
What, say that again. Mayor announces 2023.
2023. Is that what
2013.
Oh,
okay. Yeah.
Whatever decade,
okay,
Ron.
Okay.
Pick a decade.
I'm paying attention.
Thank you for fact checking me. Yeah.
Okay.
So 2023, the mayor in January, the mayor announces the program. In I think it's like April or May of 2023. Josh Zakem, the former city councilor, and this other guy whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, KZ Builders, they get together and they create a LLC to develop a property. They've never developed. Now, the guy that he is working with is a developer. That Zakim is working with is a developer.
Is he a black person?
He is.
Interesting.
And they put together this partnership, and then they go get a property. And if you look at, you can go on the website and you can see all of the developers who are in here. And again, all of them are new, sort of like this. But they have teams of very established architects and designers and construction managers and builders. So basically, the new companies are really just kind of building partnerships of old companies to build these buildings.
Or with black people.
Yeah. Well,
it'd be interesting to find that out. I mean,
but again, this is the philosophical question. Like, even if they gave this property to the Saucers, right? If Pamela Saucer Richardson gets this chunk of land, she's not going to build by herself either. She's going to have to hire some people, right? So it makes a certain amount of sort of logical sense. It's just when you look at it, you're like, hold it. It's all about starting new businesses. Yeah, but if you're just starting new businesses who are hiring old businesses, what have you really started? This is the philosophical battle. Again, I don't fault the mayor's goals on any of these things at all.
Right.
My question is, can you really achieve all these goals simultaneously in a way that delivers justice? And I don't know the answer to that question.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
can I ask a question?
Sure,
please.
This is your broadcast. I don't want to interrupt.
well, you're interrupting, but you can go ahead and interrupt.
Pastor, you're always welcome.
Okay. So, as a reporter, an investigative reporter, isn't the next step, unless you did it already, that you're going to set up some time to sit with the mayor and hear her comments on what's being done? Is that the...
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I obviously did have a very rich conversation with the city's Office of Housing, not the mayor, because they're the ones who are running this program. And they told me some things that I thought are really valuable, obviously. They said, essentially, and they don't talk about reparations. This is not a reparations process for them. What they said was, we are trying to make it possible for people to own homes in the neighborhoods where they have lived for a long period of time, or maybe they have been previously dispersed from for whatever the economic reasons. We're trying to create opportunities to bring them back to the neighborhoods and reestablish themselves. And these are the various tools. It is hard and expensive to build affordable housing.
Right.
I mean, one of the builders told me, it's going to cost us $600,000 to build one of these units, and we're only allowed to sell it for $300,000. Right? And I don't doubt that. That's what the government subsidy is all about. The government subsidy is paying for all the in-between. So it's exceptionally hard to do, and the goal, again, is an admirable goal that the city explained to me, is that they're trying to find a way to create home ownership opportunities in neighborhoods, particularly for black and brown people, where they have not had the opportunity to own homes. I don't think anybody, part of the way the city did this was that, and this came up a couple of times, is, well, our tax and title division just told us these were clean title, which is correct.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably correct, but
I don't think anybody
who cleaned those.
Right.
No,
everybody I've spoken to in this story was surprised.
Wow.
When I found the actual people who used to own these, they're just like, because nobody thought to go back that far. The thing's been in the city's books for 40 years. The city, has title. So,
because there's always a distraction, there's always a problem, there's always something going on. So what happens is that things like this get overlooked.
Yeah.
And
from a city perspective, and I understand this, right? I've covered government for years.
Right.
Someone gives you a piece of paper and says, this is the patch of land that we're going to build on. And you look at it and say, do we own this land? Yeah. Do we own it free and clear? Yeah. Okay, great. How long have we owned it? Well, it looks like a couple of decades. Nothing's been done to it? Yeah. Okay, well, let's put that in the pile of we can build on that. Nobody in government's going to say, well, where'd we get it? How did it come to us?
Mm-hmm.
Who owned it last?
Right.
Like it's just like it didn't dawn on them. I don't think to ask that question, and I don't know whether they should have. And again, that's my job. I don't know if it's their job, but now we're opening the door to this conversation about maybe there's something to be said that we should have.
What was the response? And I was just curious. You had mentioned the sisters, the Saucy sisters.
Saucer.
Yeah.
Jimmy Saucer's daughters, who are in the story, Pamela Saucer Richardson, Tracy Carter, and Brenda Saucer. I swear I'm gonna, have a shrine to them. They're such incredible people.
Yeah. I mean, what was their response when you was talking to them about losing their home and to hear about the home being given away and?
Well, we're recording. We're doing this program, broadcasting from the basement of a church. So I'm not going to repeat some of the things that were said,
right? Because
there may have been some language that was not church approved that was used.
Yeah, right,
Okay.
and we don't want to be fined by the FCC.
Yeah. They were stunned. So they knew. Again, families are what families are.
Right.
And so they had known that their father had been in some of these businesses, but they didn't know all the details of it.
Mm-hmm.
The father had remarried.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some, there's a thing about, the extended families.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
all this sort of, families are.
Right.
God gave us families for his amusement. So their first reaction was, we knew there was property, but we never knew where it was. And we'd heard about these properties, and then when I started to show them, because I went through and I pulled up all the properties their father at one point or another had been like, oh, I remember this one. Oh, that one's that one. Oh, I remember this one. And then you have this sort of, we're sitting in a Jamaican restaurant having this conversation, and they're just having this moment of realizing that it connects with all of the memories, the family memories that are kind of lost, but not really lost. And they're recognizing, and I think rightly so, that nobody ever offered them a piece of their heritage and their legacy. It just evaporated.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of, I think, real sadness. I'm not going to speak for them in that.
Right. No, I get you.
But I think there's a lot of real sadness at having lost that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the kind of outrage.
Yeah.
That we're standing on this property where their stepmother used to do haircuts, and nobody called them.
Right.
I think the best line in the story is, one of the sisters saying, "But why didn't they just reach out to somebody whose name used to be on it?"
Yeah. Right. Right.
Why is it that they're waiting for GBH to call them up and say, "Hi, are you the family of?" I wasn't the first phone call. So the best part of the story, I really enjoyed this part. Like, I'm calling around, I'm looking for people who haven't been around for 40 years, and I find, because Pamela Saucer Richardson is in the story, it's a good and distinctive name.
Mm-hmm.
So I Google her and I find her and I call and leave a message, I think, and she calls back. She's like, "You're calling about some property? Like, what is that about?" And she's like, "Oh my God," because again, nobody had thought to call them.
Right. Right. You had me cracking up when you told me how you found everything with the phone book.
Yeah.
I said, you're such an investigative reporter.
Yeah.
I did that. Who thinks of that? To go to a phone book, right? Mm-hmm. Do you remember all of this, the transition, being in Boston?
Yeah.
Throughout your life? I mean,
I remember up on Elm Hill Avenue in Sonoma Street and Maple Street, the Jewish community lived all around there.
Right.
And when I was delivering papers, not selling, but delivering newspapers, on Saturdays, they would ask me to come into their homes and turn off their stove or just turn off the lights because it's the Sabbath. So I've watched this change. And I need to commend you for doing three things. One, writing the story. But the fact that the story found its way to the Bay State Banner, the only black weekly newspaper that we have.
Right.
And now you're on the only black-owned church-based radio.
On Ron
TV
Bell's
station.
broadcast.
On Ron
okay,
Bell's
we got to make sure we get that right.
you're getting your story out.
Right.
Well, and I want to say something about that. I work for GBH News, and I'm proud of my work, and I'm proud of my team, and I love my station, which is not a station, of course, anymore. We're also online. We're on the website. We lost the W because we're no longer just a broadcast partner. We also do all these other things. But we do not have a particularly strong connection to the community that you serve here in Global Ministries Church and in this part of Codman Square.
Right.
We just don't. And so, when I called these women and had these conversations, they were very pleased to meet. We had a very lovely time together. But they also, the fact that the story was on GBH News broadcast and it was on the GBH website was nice. But one of them said to me, "Is this going to be in the banner?"
Right.
Yeah, see.
And I was like, that's a really good question. So I called the banner. I said, "Do you guys want this?" We do have an occasional partnership with them, which I'm hoping, actually, we were hoping to do more together, that they can run our stories and we can run theirs. So I called the banner and said, "Do you want it?" And they said, "Yeah, we'd love to have it." So they put it on their paper. And
that's really good.
And for that, the sisters were thrilled because that's their news source.
Right.
And for me, it again is a learning opportunity about just how much ground I have to make up to become relevant in this community. And it is my mission to be so.
And the fact that we're doing this live, but I'm going to replay this multiple times. I don't know about the other stations, but I play it multiple times because people will miss it today, but they'll hear it on Monday driving to work. And that's our partnership. We want to we support the story. We embrace it. And now we need to help you get it out there.
Right.
Well, people listen to us. They trust us, and that's one of the reasons why we came up with Boston Black News. One of the things that was just bothering me turning on the TV, seeing white folks always, reporting the news, and it's like
it didn't bother us that we saw him.
Yeah, right.
But it's the
just
other
in general.
folk,
But I didn't see him until he came here.
I wasn't from here. Yeah, I'm not from here.
Yeah, I didn't see Singer until he came here.
Yeah.
But I think this is really good, man, because there were so many people who probably lost land, and we're able to touch some of them folks.
Right.
Even if they're in Brockton or Randolph, or they may have moved back down south, so this is so important, man.
And to your point as well, after this broadcast, I'm going to stay and hang out with the pastor's youth broadcast camp.
Academy, right?
Is it the Academy, the Broadcast Academy?
Academy of Broadcasters, but
they had another name. I seen a
Voices. We just put it in there. Voices of Tomorrow, Academy of Broadcasting. We had to put that in.
And
we need their voices now.
Well, but this is the point: is that we've been talking at GBH about diversifying our staff, and I think we're making good progress there, and I'm pleased with that. But one of the things we've talked about is the pipeline does not begin after college.
Right.
Like, if we really are interested in finding diverse candidates and the next generation of people of color to be in the news business, we can't start, in college and go talk to those people about getting a job, because those are people who've already decided that they're interested in the business and have already seen a vision of themselves in it.
Good point. Yeah.
So we need to start hanging out with teenagers for stuff like this, to let teenagers just envision themselves in these roles.
Right.
So GBH, I know you guys have been out there, right? It's this great building with all this gear, and we got the boards, we got the TV studios, we got cool things. We're inviting young people to come and just visit and to look around the building. Like, okay, 800 people work here. You don't have to be a broadcaster. You don't have to be the guy who's talking on the microphone.
Right.
You could be the engineer behind the board.
Yeah.
You could be the person who does the labels, and it does the marketing, and it does the design for all of our programs. You could be the person who's doing security, who's doing facility management. Like, there's jobs.
But there were other jobs too that I was amazed when we had the Zoom call with GBH, the digital department, and they were saying all these titles I never even heard of.
Right, and these are ways into journalism for young people of color, and we want them to start getting interested when they're 14,
Right.
so that when they're 12, so that when they're 16 and 18 and starting to decide on what they're going to do, if they're going to go to college, they're going to go to technical school, they're going to go straight to a job, they need to understand that journalism is a thing they could do.
Mm-hmm.
There are opportunities for them there, and that GBH is a place that wants to know them and wants to invite them in.
That's good, because there's a lot of folks who do not know what's in that building that are from Boston. Because when I went in there, I was like, wow.
Check it out.
Something else, right?
Yeah.
You can say something.
No, I don't want to take away from the story. But I think that what we're saying is one way that these stories can get out through the white media creates it, but they need to get it out, especially the stories that pertain to us and our existence. And this is the way to do it with the partnership. But
and hold it, when you call me the white media, it does hurt. It doesn't hurt because it's incorrect, which is the thing that hurts most, I think.
Right.
It hurts because I have to remember that we're trying to become not the white media, but we are seen that way, and we need. We just
you
need to
make
learn.
up for it.
Yeah.
Because
How does it hurt? I mean, could we said white, or is it?
No, it's because it's just. It's like, you know. It's like when you talk about the short people, and I just go, oh yeah, I guess I am short. You know?
you and me both.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And I think a honest partnership, and we won't do that today either. We got a caller.
Caller, you're live on Boston Black News.
Try it again.
Caller, you're live on Boston Black News.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That's Sister
How
Priscilla.
are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. I was just listening to you guys, and I heard Singer bring up the youth, so I had to.
Well, hang on. Let's welcome Sister Priscilla Flint. Thank you so much for calling in, Sister.
Yes, that story was awesome, Paul, and I'm glad Ron got you on the show to talk about it. There's so much that's going on in our community. Just like the Blue Hub situation,
Mm-hmm.
They actually going to court in September for a hearing. That's the predatory lenders that are going through the same thing we went through with redlining. So
Priscilla.
go ahead, Ron.
No. Go ahead. Explain.
No, I want people to know I've been trying to talk about it. These people, they're literally foreclosing on people's property. They're, saying that they're going to help them, and they're really not helping them. And so the National Coalition Against Predatory Lenders, have filed a suit against them, and so they're going to be going for a summary judgment on September 10th. So I've had them on the show a couple of times. I want to bring them back because this is just another way of them, doing what they've been doing. It in some way, somehow, we got to stop it.
There's also a
and
really.
so, Paul, I appreciate you bringing this out.
Well, thank you,
and
Priscilla.
so many other things that need to be brought out as well.
Well, and there's a really interesting, and again, and I know the thing Priscilla's working on is a specific portion of this, but in all of these cases, you get to this really, again, an interesting philosophical question. We want to provide affordable housing to people. So Singer should be able to buy an affordable property in Boston. But part of the deal is, because the government has helped subsidize that Singer can then not resell it at a market rate profit.
Right.
So when Singer buys the house, Singer buys into an agreement that over the next 20 years I will live there, and that when I sell it, I'll only be able to collect X dollars.
That's crazy.
No equity.
It's not no equity, but it's limited equity.
Well, limited.
And then the problem is that when I sell that thing in 20 years, I don't have enough money from the sale to buy anything else. So I'm basically trapped in this house. So but again, here's the philosophical question. The government both wants to support me in purchasing this house affordably and wants to make sure the house stays affordable. Because if I just turn it into a market rate house in 5 years, then there's no more affordable housing in the neighborhood. So what is the answer to that question? How do we preserve its affordability without essentially trapping me in the house without a way to make a profit.
Right.
It's this really kind of funny capitalist math.
And some of the people that came onto the station to talk about that with Priscilla said that they didn't understand this when they signed the papers.
Right.
So there's a problem with that. There's deceptive.
Well, folks get so excited buying their homes, you know, and they don't think about the little print, the small print. They're like, we've you know, I got the American dream, and so they get excited, and, you know.
I can tell you that
Yes.
I am very glad that I'm married because, you know, when I bought a house,
Okay.
my wife read every page.
Okay.
I didn't.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
She's like,
See?
hold it. I'm like, okay, yeah, good point. What you got?
Surprise caller. I'm not going to give the name. Ask who it is.
Caller, you're live on Boston Black News. Can you identify yourself?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Hey, Reverend Ron Bell. This is Carolyn Crockett. Hey, singer.
Hey, Carolyn.
Hey, how you
are
doing?
Well,
Nice to hear from you.
I can hear you a little bit. but
okay,
it's
we
a
can
little
hear you
bit-
now. Okay.
Okay,
We
great.
do.
Good morning. Good
Good.
morning, and thank you for this fantastic story.
Thank you very much. That means a lot coming from you.
Are we losing it?
Are we losing you?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now.
Sorry about that. Great. No, I just wanted to say this is such an important conversation here. Singer, as usual, you are bringing the heat here. But it's fantastic to think about the ways that we can understand an important history and try to get it right.
Yeah, this is good.
Well, and Dr. Crockett, you've got a lot. You're doing a lot of that work now, and a lot of the experience and knowledge that I think we should talk more about. That you know, it's not about what's going on in any period of time without sort of looking at the historic patterns of what has happened before. And I did not know much about, you know, the sort of the lending scandals in Roxbury and Mattapan in the 1960s.
You know, there's just the thing about this story, and I appreciate the shout out there. Thank you. Is that there is some precedent here for some work that's happening actually in Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay.
So you're exactly right to call out this moment of renewal and redlining and trying to figure out what are the ways that we can correct some of those stories around land taking and connect it back to reparations. So that hook in is really effective because, as we know, across the country, this is just a horrific story of so many people, black people, people of color, immigrant families losing land, losing businesses, and as cities try to think about how to give people that, how to think about reparations, I think Asheville is providing some real instructions. There's a team of researchers from the University of Maryland who are doing computational science, historical research to look at actual urban renewal parcels, again, in Asheville and determine who lived there. So often, as you mentioned, Singer, on the titles, you have people who are the owners of these lands who can be identified on properties, but a lot of times there are working people who are renting, and so obviously their names are not on the deed. And so what the team at the University of Maryland did is they went through photographs and invited the public to identify people in many of these photographs and started to reach out to those families, much like we have done with the authors. And so actually talking to people, getting their stories, and using that as a way for folks, for the municipal team in Asheville to begin to quantify the land and the taking. And as you rightly note, because so many of these neighborhoods and communities are remade through urban renewal, it's difficult to identify streets. To the parcels, almost impossible. So what the team did is they layered a series of maps on top of one another to begin to carve out where those streets were. We know that right even in Roxbury Crossing, like Columbus Ave, Tremont Street, those streets have been shifted.
Yes.
And so some of the side streets, it becomes really difficult to know what was there. So
Well,
I'm going to go ahead and just listen to your response. I can't hear you so well on the phone line. I'm in motion, but I'm so grateful for this story, and I feel like whether it's Boston's conversation around reparations or Asheville Evanston or Providence, we have something to say, and you're offering us a really important sightline. So I'm going to jump off, but thank you so much for doing this. And Reverend Ron, you just keep bringing it. The two of you,
thank you.
The best possible light and heat on this call today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Crockett.
Yeah.
And this gets to the point that, and you know, the thing is, Dr. Crockett's got students, which is good.
Oh, yeah.
Because we could borrow those. because the issue becomes exactly what she was saying is if we, what streets were there? If we can find out what the streets were, even just the street names, I have these directories and I figured out
That's interesting.
that we can basically document all the addresses and who was living there at the time. And the way these directories are constructed, they actually do indicate the ownership.
Right.
Now, again, there's a whole bunch of questions about the directories being accurate, but whatever. It's a really good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
We could, if you can give me the name of a street that was bulldozed in 1970,
Mm-hmm.
I can show you the list of addresses and names that were affiliated with that street in 1970,
Right.
and it gives us a place to start our research. So that's something we're going to try, but it's also an enormous task, and I am a reporter with other jobs
Right.
to do, right? So we have to figure out how we can get at that, but I'm really, really, really interested in it.
That'd be great, man. So, well, thank you, man. I'm really glad that you brought this to us, and it definitely got my attention and got me thinking about what happened to Boston, what happened to Black Boston.
What happened to Black Boston?
You know what I mean? It is like, wow, you know, and then you wonder why folks, you know, just starving,
Yeah.
you know. Anyway, that's why it's important that we get out and vote. Make sure you go out and get your voter registration. August 26th is the last day.
And can I be clear, Ron? Even
Yeah.
though there's not a mayoral race, right? There may not be a city council race this year. There's still a reason to vote.
Yes, there you go. It's a U.S. senator. That's a race. We have the congressional race. Actually, you get the book. You can find them all. State representatives. Make sure you go out and register. You know, state primary September 3rd. Polls open at 7 a.m. They close at 8 p.m. You can also get early voting, and that begins on last day to register to vote, last day to apply to vote by mail, August 26th. August 23rd to September 1st is early voting. Again, September 3rd, make sure you get your ballots in. This is a very important election coming up on the state primary, and November 5th is the presidential election. So we'll be back next week. I really enjoyed this conversation. Singer, thanks
Thank you.
again, and hope to see you probably very soon.
It is an honor to be here as always, and
Yeah,
a pleasure,
man.
and great to see you.
Thank
you
you,
so
man.
much.